Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another neighborhood review. Today we're reviewing Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and today we will be asking the question, is it worth playing and or buying? So this game is published by EA, Electronic Arts, and it goes for $69.99, which it's hitting that new threshold that we're seeing in modern games and stuff. And also, it's technically available on Steam, but Steam opens up the EA app, so it's kind of only available on EA. And overall, it's an open world game. You have different skills, you have different things, there's collectibles and stuff, secret passages, things that you can do throughout the game. There's perks, fighting styles, but I'll get more into that. So to me personally, there are three things that make a game great. There's gameplay, which is the overall feel and the way the game moves and plays. Immersion, which is story or the world and the environment if there isn't an actual story or dialogue. And then the progression system. Does it feel like you're engaging with the game? Do you feel progress? Is it actually developing? And do you feel that sense of time commitment? So starting off with gameplay, in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, as I mentioned, there's different ways to play the game. You have different stance styles, you have which mean different lightsaber stances. You have a single one, you have dual wield, you have a double-sided one, you can use saber and a gun, and then you have this giant great sword style lightsaber, which I think is pretty cool. It adds different play styles. It lets you customize how you want to play. Some are heavier, some do more damage, some have different attacks, and then each one also has its own skill tree, and so they can get stronger and you can change the way you play. And then also there's perks in the game which further add to customization, and then also you can upgrade your force powers, which are separate from your lightsaber and stuff, which usually, I mean, pretty much you have to use them in tandem with your lightsabers, but for the most part they all have their own skill trees, so there's a lot of customization for different play styles and how you want to progress the game. But then that's all in terms of combat, and then there's also the way you move about the world. So it's an open world, but it's kind of more semi-open world. It's mostly linear because you unlock certain powers and things that you can do later on in the game, and so a lot of areas are sort of blocked off for the beginning, which makes sense. That's usually how a lot of things are in terms of open world. In some games you can kind of go everywhere, but basically you start unlocking other things, but the main way of traversal is a sort of parkour, which I think is pretty cool because I don't do parkour, but I've seen videos, and you know, they have certain ways that they jump, they grab the ledges, they climb over, and they incorporated all that in Cal's movements and the way it looks visually, and it looks very fluid. It also feels pretty fluid. You have double jumps, you have dashes, at some point you get an air dash, and so it can sort of be a little wonky because he does like a tiny bit of a run after you land, so I have fallen off at some points, but for the most part the game feels good. And combat feels good, movement feels good. Going back to combat, there's also different difficulties. So there's actually 5. You can start with, the first one's called story mode, and then that one, the enemies don't do anything to you really. You take no damage, you kill them in one hit, pretty much. Obviously not everything, but it's just there so that you can experience the story of Cal and see what he does. Just focus on that only, and just breeze through the combat. And then there's one that's after that, and then the middle one, which I think is probably recommended for most players. And that one's basically right in the middle, balanced. You do regular damage, you take regular damage. Nothing's overly difficult, but you'll still have a challenge with certain enemies, mostly bosses and stuff. And then there's this one, there's another one after that which is slightly harder, but then there's another one called Grandmaster. That's the hardest one, and I started with that one, but then I was playing on stream and I didn't want this game to take a really long time, and so I actually ended up moving down from it, but I really enjoyed it. And the thing about Grandmaster is it makes it feel more like a Souls-like type game, because especially in the beginning before you find upgrades for your health, because you can upgrade and find health upgrades so that you take less damage, but you also take more damage in terms of amount. But in the beginning, before you have all that, you die in 1 or 2 hits in this Grandmaster difficulty, so you really have to be good about parrying and dodging. It takes a lot more skill to play that way, and I think it's really fun. and I probably should have stuck to it, but I was having trouble with one of the bosses. I didn't want to spend too long on it, so I sort of moved down, and I continued at the one right below. But still, I think that is a really cool thing, because you can either play for the story, play in the middle, or treat it super difficult, which if you're a Souls-like player or something, you'd probably be fine with it. And then moving on to the immersion, which is story and the world and how it felt and how in the game I felt like it was. I think that the world itself, there's a really far render distance, and this might be a problem for some older computers and lower spec systems, but you get to see a lot of the environment way in this distance, and you see the shadows and the clouds and all this other stuff, and then the graphics itself, even the immediate environment is really, I think it was done really well. It looks really nice. And then a thing that I like is when you hit certain plants or certain enemies or world environment things that you hit, you'll see the cauterization where it cut through. It's not always perfect, but they do a pretty good job on showing the cut where you hit it for the most part. But regardless, I think that's a cool detail that they added. You could also turn this off if, I don't know, you have kids playing or something. You can take off the dismemberment of actual enemies. But I think leaving it on adds a little small layer of depth. And in terms of the story, I mostly liked it. I wouldn't say it was super engaging and the most interesting story I've ever experienced. You talk to people. There's people that you're friends with. You reconnect with them. You develop the relationships. You get to know them better. And then there's some twists here and there. But for the most part, I don't think any character or any scene, I mean, maybe apart from one or two, but even then, no scenes really made me like, oh my god, this is crazy, what's going on? I feel like it did what it had to do, but it didn't really go further beyond that. So it wasn't bad, and I'd say slightly above average, but it wasn't great. And finally, the progression system. I think it has a pretty good progression pacing, and also I don't feel like I wasted time really doing much. A lot of areas you get rewarded in some way for exploring, so you actually get rewarded for trying to find little secrets and doing other stuff. And then the XP system, the way it works in this game is you defeat enemies and you do stuff and you start building up XP, but then you gotta be careful, because if you die, then you drop it, just like in the Souls-like. But you can go back and you defeat the enemy who killed you, and then you get your stuff back. And so you can be set back a bit, but even if you die or whatever, you gain the experience in terms of actual gameplay, and then you beat better, and then you come back, you fight the other people, and then just overall you're practicing, you're working on parries and dodges and attacking. I think the story was interesting enough the whole time along. Again, it wasn't amazing, but it kept me engaged enough the entire way through, so it didn't feel like I was dragging on at any point. Nothing was too difficult, nothing was too easy. And that takes me to standouts. Was there anything that truly stood out to me, whether that be positive or negative? I would probably say not really. Aside from the whole Souls-like thing, I like how the game plays on Grandmaster. I kind of wish I finished it on Grandmaster and I didn't give up. But that ability to be able to play this game, which technically I guess isn't designed to be played that way, it does give you that flexibility to play it if you want it to. If you like the challenge, I think that's really cool. There's nothing crazy that stood out to me negatively, and overall I thought it was a pretty solid game. I think a 7 is fine. I think it's good, but $70, I don't know about $70. If you want to get this game, I say wait for a sale. I think this is probably worth closer to 40. 40 I think is fair, but 70, that's that's pushing it. But that's pretty much all I have to say about that. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all on the next one. Thanks for watching.